Good evening. I'd like to call the Plan Commission meeting to order. It is 6:38. Has this meeting been published according to law?
Yes.
Looks like all Plan Commissioners are here with the exception of Commissioner Kudo, Commissioner Dan, and Commissioner Hanson.
And Trustee Carpenter.
And Trustee Carpenter, who is excused. Did anybody else call in?
They've all, yes, they all expressed they could not.
So all are excused.
Yep.
The first item for our agenda today is, a reminder, please speak into the microphone. First item on the agenda is statement of a public notice. I know we did that, right?
Yep.
Approval of the December 17th, 2019 meeting minutes. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of our December meeting.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. Any discussion? Yes, Commissioner Kylie Miller.
In addition to some tiny tweaks that I gave to Crystal, there was just one substantial change on page 12. Under that question 9.3. And this was a suggestion of Commissioner Hanson, who told me last time. The question was, what should the village stop doing? And he has said we should stop allowing developers to go beyond village plans for height. So the way it's written right now, it sounds like we should.
Are you talking about that starts with two prior?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Stop.
Yeah, that we should stop allowing developers to go beyond village plans.
Allow developers to go beyond village plans. Oh, I see. Did he say to not go beyond? He's
Right.
not here.
So it's just one of the way the question was worded, stop doing this.
Does anyone else remember that?
Well, he was sitting next to me, so I asked him about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries with the amendment, right?
Yep.
Good. All right, now we move on to agenda item number 5A, public hearing, consideration of a conditional use permit application to construct one chimney that will exceed the maximum building height on a new single-family residential home and property at 4450 North Lake Drive. I'd like to open the public meeting at this point. It is 6:40. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on the issue? Do they speak
Do you
now?
want me to introduce the issue?
Oh, did you do that during the public hearing?
I believe so.
Okay.
Is it- Yeah, typically read the staff report and then people can respond to it, so if people in the audience have not had a chance to read it, they can.
Got it. And then we close public hearing, then we discuss, right?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So just for the benefit of people in the audience who might not have read the memo, I'll just go over the brief one-page memo to outline what we're here for. So project and parcel overview. On August 22nd, 2019, the Village Design Review Board approved architectural plans for the construction of a new single-family home to be located at 4450 North Lake Drive. On October 9th, 2019, the Board of Appeals subsequently approved a setback variance due to exceptional circumstance and lack of detriment, allowing the house to be built 72.5 feet from the front property line, which is closer than the average setback on the east side of North Lake Drive as established between the two closest intersecting streets. The plans included one chimney protruding from the roof. The parcel is zoned R4, which per 535-19D has a height maximum of 30 feet. Of note, building height is measured from the established grade of frontage of the street to the mean height level between the eaves and ridges of the pitch roof. The proposed roof midpoint is 30 feet, which conforms to the required height limitation. However, the chimney exceeds that height, and per 535-30A, architectural projections such as spires, belfries, parapet walls, cupolas, domes, flues, and chimneys are conditional uses in all districts if they exceed height limitations of this chapter. The applicant has accordingly applied for a conditional use permit to allow the construction of the chimney as proposed. Proposed operations. The chimney would protrude from the roof on the south side of the east/lakeside elevation. Building code requires that, quote, masonry fireplace chimney shall extend at least 3 feet above the highest point where the chimney passes through the roof and at least 2 feet higher than any portion of the dwelling within 10 feet of the chimney. As designed, the chimney would extend approximately 14 feet from the roof, which is 2 feet higher than the maximum roof line, located within 10 feet of the chimney, thus meeting minimum code requirements. The top of the chimney would be 44 feet above grade. Based on plans on file, the height of the chimney at 4460 North Lake Drive is approximately 31 feet. The village does not have plans on file for the property at 4442 North Lake Drive, but estimates that the height of the tallest chimney is at least 35 feet. Complete height details of neighboring chimneys was requested from the applicant but not received prior to publication. A site plan confirming the finalized front setback, location of the chimney, and dimension distances to neighboring properties was also requested but not received. I did provide the updated site plan at your desk, so we did receive that prior to the meeting. Updated materials may be provided at the meeting. Review and approval per 53525, the village planning commission shall review the site, existing and proposed structures, architectural plans, neighboring uses, and the proposed operation. Conditions such as landscaping, architectural design, type of construction, planting screens, and operational controls may be required by the village planning commission upon its finding that these are necessary to fulfill the purpose and intent of this chapter. Furthermore, per 53525C, no conditional use permit shall be authorized by the planning commission unless such commission finds that the 7 following items are met. And so that's just a general statement. And that's pretty much all I had regarding the introduction of the item.
Thank you. Is there anyone in the public that would like to speak on the issue? If so, just state your name and your address.
Would you like me to
You
step
can
up
come
to
to
the
the microphone, yeah.
Stephanie Edelking, and I'm speaking on behalf of Wadeways and Architecture, which is
What's your address?
Disney's Glendale address.
Clerk?
I think just her name and that she's representing the company, we have the company's address and everything on file.
Thank you.
I just wanted to speak to a summary of the issue of what's going on, and I just wanted to speak to the point that we have designed a residential property and included a chimney in the design, which has been part of the design for the duration of this project and during the initial design review board, which was passed. We feel like we've created something that's sympathetic to the surrounding properties and that we are required, as stated before, to, by code, to exceed the ridge line of the home that was designed. And while we are a little bit beyond that point, we think that we have done something that is not out of the ordinary for the function of the chimney. And just wanted to answer any questions, if anybody has any questions, as to if that's.
Okay. We'll ask questions during the discussion after the public hearing closes.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Is there anybody else here that has anything to say or would like to talk? Okay. If not, we'll close the public hearing at 6:45 on her watch, and we will move on to opening, or 5A. Just the 5B?
Yep, consideration.
Oh, I moved all the way down. Consideration of conditional use permit application to construct one chimney that will exceed the maximum building height on a new single-family residential property, 4450 North Lake Drive. Okay, commissioners, does anyone have a question for either Bart or the applicant? Yes, Commissioner President.
Questions, as someone who's not an architect. Bart, could you just give us a brief explanation of why the village has height restrictions on houses? What's the purpose does that serve? And when projects like this one come before the design review board, do they not take into consideration that the project will exceed those height restrictions, or is that just not clear purview?
And can I just, those are my exact two questions, so I just want to rephrase a little bit so you can answer at the same time. So for design review board, are they aware of the requirement that it would be conditional use when they're presented? And if they are aware, does it matter? Probably not, so it comes here. And then how many chimneys have we denied? Like Barbara's saying, like what's the point of them coming before a plan commission?
So I'll answer the second question first. The design review board is not specifically aware of it, but I do indicate that their approval will be subject to conditional use being granted by the planning commission. So they just look at it in terms of the scale of the architecture, and they had no issues with that being, on the design. But they were aware, they do understand that it requires further approvals before it gets constructed. But it isn't in their purview necessarily to deny a design based on that. They approve the design, whether building permits or other zoning regulations come into play. That happens when we get the building plans and we review those regulations. So they're not specifically made aware, but they are aware that it has to come here.
Wouldn't it be beneficial to be made aware so that if there was a design, they could suggest it? I'm just worried that it gets all the way to planning commission and then you deny it. Whereas they could have redesigned it right there if needed, and were amicable to it.
Yeah, it could go both ways. We often tell applicants to apply for the design they want. I don't want to have them redesign it if it's fine with the design board and the planning commission to have it as they want it. I wouldn't want to preclude them and say, no, you should design it at 30 feet, don't apply until you have it that way, so.
Right, I just wondered if, I think it would be prudent just to tell DRB if there is a conditional use and what it is.
Like I said, they are made aware that it will require further
On the
consideration.
chimney,
What's that?
on the chimney.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
So that hopefully answers the question on DER. The general concept of height limitations would be to protect the neighboring properties, both in context, scale, aesthetics, things like that, but also light and ventilation. So if your house is, blocked by a 40-foot house, you wouldn't necessarily like that. So it's just in general meant to provide some consistency within the zoning district. The specific requirements of a chimney being above a height restriction, I have never seen that before.
Well, we had one.
Well, I mean, in a zoning code generally, it's usually the height of the roof that
Right.
is what's measured.
Okay.
I don't have a large experience with other zoning codes, but I've never run into having to take chimneys or cupolas or things like that.
Have you ever seen a chimney like built 4 stories? What, I mean, like, or abnormally large that you would want to regulate that?
On a residential property, I don't think you'd ever run into it. On a commercial property or industrial property, I think you could get a large chimney.
I see.
So in that case, in a commercial district, I think it makes sense to have that regulation. So, the roof line may be at 30 feet, but because of whatever you're doing in that building, you need to have exhaust higher than that.
Okay.
I don't think in a residential application, it's gonna be too frequent that you would ever need it to be higher than what code would, require, but, and then to the general point of this particular application, and similar, we had one a couple months ago, where we have larger houses in the village, it often is that they have larger chimneys as well. So in the context of this particular address, I don't see it being an outlier of the neighborhood. If it were, next to houses that didn't have that same scale, I think the planning commission might want to review it a little more specifically, but that's why I provided neighboring heights as a benchmark. Both, I think, do exceed the 30 feet. It's just.
My guess is nobody designs a chimney any bigger than they need to for the exhaust, just because you don't see it means it costs money. That would be my thought.
And it would only work so tall.
Right, and then, so Commissioner, same thing at the top.
Well, is the house to the south, is their roof line at 30 feet too? It's just that their chimneys are off to the side, so therefore they can stay under the limit?
I'm betting that house was built before our current zoning code, and.
I know it was remodeled.
Well, remodeling was
In the
different.
Well, like they redid the whole,
Outside?
it was a completely different home with a different roof line before.
Could have been grandfathered in, is that right, Mom?
I'm just wondering, like, is the 30-foot, I guess I'm wondering, is the chimney meant as a limitation on the 30-foot roof line, or the 30-foot roof line is what we care about? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if the chimney is the point, then you do have to drop your roof line. This allows people, if we allow for chimneys to go beyond that, your roof line, it extends the roof
Does the
line.
30 feet include the chimney, is that what you're asking?
No, I'm
Okay.
saying like, if the concern or homes are below, is the new guideline, most people do a 30-foot roof line now, and so that's why we had that last chimney one, and now we have another chimney one.
Oh, I see.
Or in the past,
They're lower,
they were shorter.
the house itself.
Yeah, I would argue it's the roof line that I think we probably should care about the most, because in that sense, if you build a house without a chimney, you can still get to that height. And so it's not like the chimney matters in terms of how the height, if your neighbor can build a 30-foot house, they'll build a 30-foot house. That chimney is just kind of extra. And if you did it based on the chimney, then they can build a 25-foot house or something. At that point, then you're up and down with
But I think
those
what she's
scales.
asking is, because we've seen 2 recently, is it because more people are building to the 30 maximum roof line? And whereas before maybe they were building 25, so that,
I can't speak to before and whether or not this was even being, reviewed at the time of most construction of houses.
so how tall are most of the roof lines? Do you have any idea?
They're probably maxed out at,
Most of them.
I mean, when I spoke with the inspector, I thought he said from the ground floor, maybe the architect could fill in this, the ground floor to the roof is typically around 18 feet, and then you add a roof to that, and it doesn't take much to get to 30 feet for a 2-foot house, particularly the style of houses that we have here in Shorewood with pitched roofs. So I would imagine the 30-foot is pretty average for building height, and then the chimney just happens to go beyond that because code requires that it does extend beyond, the combustible area of the material. So
Can you just answer one more question, because I missed it in the packet, but how many feet can a chimney be and not have to be conditional use?
it needs to be under the height level, so it needs to be under 30 feet.
Oh, so you have to have your roof level, so
Correct.
every chimney.
Yes.
So if roofs are allowed to go up to 30, every chimney's gonna be a special use.
I am not opposed to changing this code section.
Okay.
It just,
I would suggest you knock that down, because these poor applicants that have to come before us for no reason to.
Or the
Necessarily.
chimney, not the other item.
Yeah, just the chimney, perfect, thank you.
Or should get flagpoles in the houses.
Right, but chimneys are kind of a necessity, if I
I'm okay with chimneys in the building.
or you could write it that was in this with, code, the minimum code, right? So you're allowed a 30-foot chimney, but in this case, right, you have to be so many feet above that roof. You could say as long as the chimney is no more than code requires, it doesn't need a conditional use permit. If they want to go
That's
5
right.
feet above code,
Like that.
then perhaps they would have to.
And
come
what
in.
is code, 5 feet, do you know?
So that's the section that I read off.
I know,
Um,
a lot of words.
So masonry fireplace chimney shall extend at least 3 feet above the highest point where the chimney passes through the roof and at least 2 feet higher than any portion of the dwelling within 10 feet of the chimney. So you need to draw a circle, a radius 10 feet around that and make sure that it's.
Okay,
at
well,
least 2
highest
foot.
can be 30, right? The roof line is 30.
Well, it's the mean of the roof line too. It's from the,
Oh, I see.
it's the middle essentially, right? So then you draw a 10-foot circle around that. Anything within 10 feet, it's gotta be 2 feet higher than that.
Gotta be something simpler, but thank you. Thank you so much, yes, for sure.
There's a lot of moving parts to this. It reminds me of those word problems you had in 4th grade with the trains leaving Denver to Pittsburgh and going to.
Yeah,
But
yeah, I
yes,
don't like
when you-
those.
when you think about the 30 feet is
Simple.
between, say, the eaves and the top ridge of the roof, it stands to reason the chimney's gonna be taller. So when you think about that, it's not like it's, 10 feet, when it talks about it being 44 feet above grade, well,
Correct.
it's really only 2 to 3 feet
Above
above
the
the
ridge.
very top ridge of the house, the roof. So it's not gonna be towering over
Right.
the house. Whether the surrounding houses maybe are ranch style or have a small attic or whatever, that's another story, because,
Correct.
the house itself, at the point where it's measured, meets the maximum. So that makes it a little bit more simpler to think about.
Sure.
Excellent. Any other questions? I would just suggest you jot that down when we're redoing the zoning code, during our comp plan, hopefully. Alrighty, thank you. So without further discussion, do I have a motion? Any? Your turn, but not me.
Sorry,
I forgot my reading glasses.
I move, here we go, you ready? I move to approve the conditional use application to construct a chimney that exceeds the maximum building height on a new single-family resident at the residential property 4450 North Lakewood Drive.
I'll second.
So we got a motion by Commissioner Klein, a second by Commissioner Kylie Miller. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sorry to bother you on this freezing day.
Thank you.
Good luck. All right, our next item, so is 6, agenda item number 6, consideration of the CDA Village Board Strategic Goals and Priorities Survey on Economic Development and Housing. Director Burke.
So last meeting, we went through a lengthy discussion of some answers to the questions that were provided within the survey here. This meeting is hopefully aimed at whittling those down to the required number of submissions that you're allowed and then prioritizing them. So unless you have a better, I did send out a request to prioritize, and I got one response, so at that point, it wasn't necessarily.
Of course. This commissioner
It wasn't
left.
necessarily worth compiling
It
those.
used to be me, but I got overwhelmed.
So at this point, we're starting with the list that was discussed at last meeting with the goal of whittling those down to, question number 2 asks that you submit 3 of them. And, if you want to combine them somehow with some conjunctions and commas, we can work with it as we need to, but we need to submit an answer by consensus from the Plan Commission by January 30th. So this is our last meeting to do that. So understanding that if we'd like to just go question by question, we can go that way.
Yes.
So I think we confirmed last meeting that we do want to answer, the Plan Commission does want to answer the economic development portion of it. So number 1 is a yes. Number 2 is, what do you think the village's greatest strengths when it comes to economic development? In the spaces below, please write a brief description of up to 3 of your ideas. And so 3 are allowed in.
So Bart, I know you're gonna count them all, but before you start counting, a bunch of these that I've noticed can be combined. And
Yes.
so, we can make it a longer sentence or run-on sentence, but we don't need additional. So if you look at location, we have bullet point number 1, or 2, which is your close proximity to certain areas. You have number, the bullet point that starts with location to Milwaukee, and then you have bedroom community 5 minutes from Milwaukee. So all of those tend to me are location. Is that correct?
I would agree that
So
3
repeat.
of the 15 appear to be location.
Okay, so let's just put X's, we'll whittle them down. So we have one of our options is location, and we can expand on it. The other one to me would be, you have walkability, and you see that at the very bottom, second to the bottom, but you also see not auto-centric. So those kind of are the same thing. It's walkable and without use, I don't know what the word is, but
Argue
Without the
density
need
is
for
part
a
of that
car.
as well, right?
without the need for a car, or which creates less reliance on an auto, something like that. Less reliance on an automobile. And then you have, okay, is there anything else that can be combined? High income, no. Density, is density and concentrated market the same thing?
And that lends itself towards walkability, so if you wanted to combine that with
Well, you could
a
say.
dense walkable community, could say that.
Natural amenities.
With natural.
And don't low crime.
I only have one suggestion. Okay, and then, I'm just looking for a second. Low crime you can't combine, multi-age community is diversity, isn't it? Those two?
Part of it.
Yeah, so,
Not all of it.
not all of it, but it's part of it, so we could elaborate on diversity if we needed to. All right, so we have diversity, location, walkability, less reliance on a car. I guess we have income and housing stock and schools.
My first vote on that was the second point because, again, it's location. Close to downtown, close to the east side, close to, Fish Bay, Fox Point, and so on. So, oops. But that brings customers to businesses as well as people looking for a place to live.
I understand.
So I think that would be combined.
Oh, yes, but bullet number 2 could be under location, yes. I have that. Okay, so I'm gonna read them again, and then if I forgot something. We've got location, diversity of people, whether it's age or whatever we want to fill in there. Location, which is, all of the above. Walkability, which includes less reliance on cars. High income, housing stock, I'm assuming that means diversity of housing stock, and schools.
I don't know if all those belong under economic strengths. I mean, they are tangentially,
Right, which one? Give me an example.
like schools. I mean, they are good schools and that may be why people come here, but that's not a reason that economic development, unless those businesses specifically serve the needs of schools or school-age population.
That's a great point. Is this economic development and housing, or is this?
There's a separate one for housing.
So there's, right, part 2 of this is specific to housing.
I see what you're saying.
So this is more about commercial.
You are correct,
projects.
it's tangential, but without the schools, we'd have no people living here. I mean, we have some, so I'm wondering if that,
Well, the east side has people living in,
Look pretty
people sort of
organized.
find other.
oh, I'm just talking about Shorewood, people come here from schools. Most people.
Right, but I'm saying, like, then you would just say population versus the
I see what you're
schools themselves.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
And so that would be the population density, the diversity, so one could have location, population,
So you could say demographics in general.
and, yeah. I mean, that could combine a bunch of those.
Yeah.
Or diversity of people and housing. No.
We know those are two separate ones, but diversity of people, what did we say here? Diversity of, people. It's not just demographics. I think it's the fact that when I heard diversity for economic development reasons, you've got young, you've got old, you've got the lower income, you've got higher income. For economic development, that's important because they're gonna look at that and say, what's the customer? Is,
So you could say a diverse demographic profile, I mean,
That
that
might
covers all that stuff.
okay. You think that'll cover it all? Anyone have an objection to that? Okay. Okay, so if those are all of them, any other ones that you get that you think are tangential but not necessarily direct?
Well, I guess I still wondered why housing, the diverse housing stock, I mean, is that, we're still talking about sort of like demographics in terms of wealth, like, or, I mean, I guess I was like, what is housing?
Right.
I think it's more important that the variety of commercial spaces would be more important than actually the type of housing that exists.
I agree. So I had to reread the question. What do you think are the village's greatest strengths when it comes to economic development? So it could be, high income could be one,
That would be covered under demographics.
right? You could specify though, because if you
Yeah, we
think about,
can put it in parentheses.
I would say
Income,
higher
age.
income, I don't know if it's
Multi-
called high income, but higher than surrounding areas besides, like Milwaukee. I do think the housing, I'm trying to think about housing stock. It's important that you have open housing stock in order to, maybe not. Okay. I am under, my number one is location, because I think being so close to the central city, like the city of Milwaukee, is very good for customers, meaning they will take that into consideration, like their 5-mile radius during the market analysis, which means there's a big population out there that's close by. So I would vote for that one as one of the biggest strengths. Commissioner Khan?
I agree.
I think location is number one.
I think it's big. Then we have walkability, less reliance on cars. I think that's why people move here. Is that why people develop commercial space?
I feel like, well, it depends. I mean, there's the businesses, some businesses count on people, like the foot traffic.
Foot traffic.
So it would be foot traffic within the business district, or that people would walk to the business district.
What is a concentrated market?
I would interpret that to be,
Density?
there's density of people who will purchase. from
That's what
wherever,
I'm thinking.
you know.
Yeah, you have a, so density is one of them here.
Yeah.
I do, we could combine
I think
those,
you
but
could
just,
combine that with
yeah.
available customers.
I think that's huge, because people assume, I mean, if you look at Whitefish Bay, the population is much less, isn't it? Am I saying that wrong? I know they have single families and,
I don't know if it's much less, but it is less.
okay, so.
Yeah, we are more dense than they are.
And I think that because we're so dense, people can
Be
get
more
to
rental.
the establishment much quicker. So that could be one.
Yeah, I think you could logically combine walkable and density, kind of the same thing. It's a concentrated development pattern with,
Foot traffic.
purchasing power and foot traffic and things like that, so.
I would do that.
It'd be good
A
with
dense walkable community.
Dense walkability
Diversity.
with high foot traffic, right? I mean, that's some given kind of.
Some of us like to drive cars.
Well, you can still drive. You're in the density part. We're talking about the foot traffic over here. I'm sure you walk to some of this. Okay, and do we have a third?
I have that down as the diverse demographic profile,
Yeah.
and I have income and age as the two that were specified.
In the diverse.
Multi-age and income. Yeah.
I would, yeah, but what's so great about the income, we have high income, we have higher income than many surrounding communities. I mean, I don't think low income is great, I mean, it's just not the biggest positive for economic development.
Does, this community has a pretty high percentage of college graduates. Does that have any economic benefit? Or not so much when it comes to
No.
economic development?
I think it's more of the money, that most people with higher education, like with a graduate degree, probably earn higher. That's my assumption, and therefore they have a larger purchasing power. Maybe that's the word. We have a, instead of just high income, it's like high income with high,
Well, it's disposable income, right?
right, purchasing power. I don't know what the word
I don't know,
is.
do you want to, I struggle with that one,
Yeah.
because we offer services, we offer healthcare,
Mhm.
that's not disposable income.
Yeah, I don't know, and we just had a thing that says a lot of the people that live here in single-family homes, I don't remember the percentage, but actually use like 100%, like 80 to 100% of the disposable income for housing. Correct? Something very high
Yeah, and we,
in certain
I like to see a
income levels.
variety of income levels in every community, I like that full spectrum of diversity.
But in terms, I think the education part, oh, sorry. I think the education part can be attractive to some businesses. I do believe Casa de Corazon moved into this market because the higher education level of the residents, they thought was something that would, they thought that profile of people would like to have a multilingual daycare
They would
experience.
value that.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they look at demographics like that, and, you know, I'm sure other businesses would value higher education.
I guarantee you they
Customers.
looked at the children more than the status of their parents in graduate school.
Both.
I think both, maybe. All right, we can do that.
So to pick a third?
Do we have three now?
I think, so I have number one being location, number two a walkable dense community with a bunch of descriptions on that, and number three being the diverse demographic profile.
I think we need to specify why location, because as a negative, we also say that we're located on one side by a lake.
Sure.
And so I think it's important that if we're going to say it as a negative potentially, that we need to say why it's a positive. So I just say close to a major metropolitan,
Yeah, close to an urban center.
urban center or part of the major metropolitan area. Okay.
Are both the first two are location then? Like, I guess, because you have, the first is the like a more global location, and then the second one is more within Shorewood.
The development, how we developed.
Yeah, how it's been developed.
Right.
Can you say it again? What's number two?
The walk-
Number two is walkable dense community. We developed into that kind of pattern.
Well, density is, yes, but it's different than location. It's
It's the number.
Correct, yep, it's
it's the
different.
number of people in a space. So it
Yeah,
definitely is
where we are
different.
and what's in it, what's in our borders.
Right, and I think the important part of density is that they can reach that commercial district very quickly, like, whereas if you're spread out, you're less dense, then you have to drive further to get to the commercial area. So how did you define number two?
So I have a walkable dense community, and then we talked about, can't read my handwriting here.
I'm just wondering if we say why that's important. Walkable dense community.
I think I said with close
Oh, foot
markets.
traffic.
Oh, that is foot
High
traffic.
foot
That's
traffic.
foot traffic.
With high foot traffic and,
They've seen my handwriting.
and
you know, I'm
ability
struggling with.
to, and ability to get, so density, that means higher foot traffic, and it also means, with a quick ability to get to the commercial district, right? Like, because it's so dense with the, how do you phrase that? But the ability to get there very quickly, whether,
Yeah, local.
yeah. Because it's dense. So just an indicator of what we mean by that. What'd you put? Higher foot traffic and
I heard proximity to amenities or commercial districts or foot
commercial
traffic.
district. Yep, so I'd say foot traffic and proximity to the commercial district. Quick, you're able to get there quicker. You don't have to drive far. Whatever it is. All right, and what's your number 3?
The diverse demographic profile,
In parentheses?
we had multi-age, higher education, and then there was discussion of higher income or purchasing power.
All of the above?
Wait, I can put all 4, sure.
Okay. Deal? Are we done with that one?
Yep,
Move on.
that
Perfect.
seems like a consensus to me.
On that location, in
Maybe
addition to
not.
saying close to a major metropolitan area, can we also just say, and the other North Shore communities, because they're coming in both directions, so.
I don't think that's positive because that's where they go to. We're competing against them.
Yeah, but, you know, businesses here can't rely on people
Oh, I see.
from the east side, I'm just
Oh,
saying.
there's tons of Whitefish Bay people
That come and shop here, absolutely.
that shop and
Yeah.
eat.
Okay,
Yep.
I'm fine with that.
People probably work for, people are not people.
If we were talking about housing, I'd argue, but for commercial development, yes. All right, number 3, we have, what do you think are the biggest issues or challenges? Now, let's go through so we can find it. I have outdated zoning code, and I believe that condition, that also wraps in your where'd it go? Home and office startup business restrictions, right? Because those are in our zoning code. I just remember our discussion with the housing person. They wanted us to change our zoning code for these reasons. Parking, maybe not necessarily, but I know parking restrictions have a big thing, you know, in our code. We have not looked at that and redid parking in our code for a while, since, I don't know, 77. Yeah, outdated parking regulations. Is there anything else that goes with zoning? No.
You could possibly include parcel size and configuration, but I think that was actually more of a
I think that's actually. for
historical
redevelopment.
development as opposed to, because we don't have open space. But
Yeah, I don't think that's zoning. It's actual reality.
right,
Our parcels, if you were to redevelop, are not the best.
because we would allow you to consolidate your parcels into the current zoning code. That's not an issue. You don't have maximum sizes, so that's
I do think so when I was on the bid, and I think it relates to that bullet point, when I was on the bid, one of the biggest challenges some of the bid board members thought was that the commercial district is so spread out. And that, so there's gaps in between, there's residential in between, it's on 2 major thoroughfares, not just one. And there's not a lot of contiguous commercial space, like parcels or buildings. And then when you do have a building, look at the corner of Capitol and Oakland, the configuration is very old, like it's not configured the way a new tenant would want it. And so it's not white boxed, it's old, it's not conducive to the new technology and things like that that have a different configuration of space. And so somehow, that was the bid's #1 thought of why we challenged economic development. So I do think it's valid. And I don't know how to say it, but the fact that we are, I mean, it sounds silly, we're spread out, we're half a mile in either direction, right? But it is true that that district is not a concentrated district. You may think Oakland is, but if you walk it, you'll see that it's not like Whitefish Bay on Silver Spring, where there's commercial after commercial after commercial. Is that correct? Am I saying that correct?
Yeah, my understanding is that's the result of it being a streetcar suburb where those were the streetcar stops, so commercial development happened on those nodes, and then in between there was less commercial activity. And so, right, you have the 3 nodes of where the streetcar would have stopped, and that's when the development happened, and so that's where commercial was concentrated, and the in-between parts became residential either at that time or over time because it wasn't as immediate to the stop. And so, if Whitefish Bay didn't have a streetcar, they would have had that same development pattern. So that's my understanding of
Yeah.
the legacy of, why the district is what it is.
So, yes.
Well, I was gonna say, so like, I know we talked about in the walkability is a positive, and I do agree that like people will walk to where they wanna go, but they do not walk up and down
That's
Rosewood.
what.
So it's a different kind of walkability.
Yes, I agree with you.
Well, personally, I feel like I will walk, north of Lake Bluff
Yep.
because there's not as many driveways and things that I have to be concerned about when I'm walking.
It's,
Going south, there's a million driveways and stuff, so if I'm going there, I'm going to a specific business.
Yes.
And then,
You may not know this, but the north of Lake Bluff is because it's contiguous commercial. You feel very comfortable, because you've got that, starting.
Well, you don't, I mean, it's contiguous commercial the other way too, it's just,
Not
there's a
really.
driveway.
Well, but it's like bank, it's setback bank, it's not a consistent, commercial street front. Is that how I put it? Because the street front, if you look at Whitefish Bay, just for instance, okay, I'm just gonna use them for example, or any main street in Milwaukee, but it's contiguous. You may have side streets that come through, but you rarely have a street frontage, commercial street frontage where you'll see a big break and a bank will be 20 feet back. And
But there is, like, if you go, so I know, so I'm like, here's my daily walking routine, like, I'm like, wait, if you go north from Lake Bluff, there's the bank, then there's an apartment
bank's a problem.
buildings,
The
there's
apartment
this,
building's a
and
problem.
then before you get to something, but it just, if I even let my children go somewhere, I'm gonna say go north, don't go this way, because there's just a lot of driveways to
you're saying the
watch
same
for.
thing I'm saying.
Yeah.
Because the bank and the apartment building, in planner's terms, it kills the street frontage of a commercial district. Anytime you have setback buildings and residential use on the first floor for a period of time, you're not a contiguous commercial street front. And that is a really hard thing to overcome to become a vibrant commercial district in history.
Yeah. The other problem with south of,
So I think
Capital.
you feel it, but you don't know why.
down,
Yeah.
you know, it's on a hill too, south of Capitol, it's just, that's another, for a lot of people with mobility issues, that walk.
Well, I was thinking more, I guess I am confused by it,
You're talking
because I don't think you
Driveways
can,
and stuff.
yeah, I don't think it doesn't stop me if there's an apartment building between here and there to go to. It's just same as like running on Lake Drive, whether you run on the east side or the west side. You know, like on one side, you don't have to worry about cars as much, and the other side, every break.
Let me just tell you as a commercial person though, commercial small businesses want to be located next to other small businesses because you feed off of each other. That's why you see McDonald's and Burger King and Wendy's all in the same area. They're not stupid. They know, you know, it's TJ Maxx, if you see one of those strip malls, they know exactly, because they're gonna get customers from the other places. So in an economic development world, commercial people look at that. And so being that there's an apartment building and a bank, before you can get to the next commercial use, like a shop or something where you can buy goods, is a detriment to attracting businesses. A walker might not feel that way, like you're saying. If you're as a customer, you may be okay with walking a little further, but I can tell you, if you want a pair of shoes and you want, you know, a little gift, you naturally in the commercial world prefer when there are things together, so you don't have to go too far, and that's why development happens in strip malls. Not that we want that, or on main streets, but we just have a lot of breaks, and there's not a lot of commercial to feed. Like I have a clothing store, there's not a shoe store anywhere near me. If there was, I'd have more customers, because those shoe people might go, oh, just check that out because they're shopping. But it's definitely one of the biggest complaints, or feel like the biggest challenge.
I had different choices for what I thought the 3 challenges or issues were. Well, actually 4. I had a tie for the 3rd position.
Okay.
The 3rd point, that because we're smaller, we don't have the financial resources that, say, a city like Milwaukee size was for, you know, to promote developments. We don't have that. We don't have an endowment or, you know, huge.
Say that again, because we're smaller. They don't care about boundaries.
We don't
commercial?
have the cash
Do
to
we
offer
do-
financial incentives.
Oh, incentives, okay.
Yeah, whether it's a tip or a loan or a grant. Number 2, I thought was taxes, that if someone's looking at what's my bottom line gonna be, I'm gonna buy a building or develop here, what's that additional cost gonna be to me? And then I had a tie for 3rd between lack of diverse uses, which might draw a number of people. You come in for coffee, because you're only gonna go to one coffee place instead of, you know, I'm gonna come for coffee, then I'm gonna go here, then I'm gonna go there. And then the other one I had tied for was low daytime population, because we are a veteran community.
That's huge.
That the shoppers,
I'm telling you, that's huge.
yeah.
Because you can't get restaurants here.
Yeah.
Because there's no lunch crowd.
I mean, those are the
I just talked to
ones that I
just
thought were challenges.
about it.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Are we talking about 2 different things? So like when we
Challenges.
talk about economic development, on the one hand, you said economic development of properties. On the other hand, we're talking about like what kind of businesses would come in here.
Both
And
for economic development.
Right, I know, but those have two different,
So for
are we just
taxes,
combining all that?
so for taxes would affect both commercial development and tenants, because the tenants are gonna get passed down through the rent, and commercial developers are gonna be paying those taxes, like, say, Roundy's or something, they have to pay the taxes, or whatever, that building, in their lease, they pay taxes. So I do believe that taxes will affect commercial development and recruitment, so, I think, does that answer that part?
Yeah, I was just thinking like, what are we prioritizing, about things that affect both?
Things that affect commercial activity, I guess, yes.
Okay.
And so,
Well, didn't one of you say last time
Didn't
commercial
stop.
development
not
means
your market, but
growing our tax base?
It can be, yes, correct.
Yeah,
Stable property values.
increasing those values.
I've never seen the
Building
taxes
vacancies.
to date defer commercial development. That has
Well,
not been the biggest factor. It definitely has a factor in housing, but I haven't noticed that yet here,
well,
even
say,
though they're really high.
because it was like the Sherman, the Oaks of Shorewood,
Yep.
we're giving them, I think it's like a 24% rebate on their property taxes.
Well, that's a subsidy, yeah.
Right, so, I mean, that's,
Only for a period of time,
it's
yes.
a development, you know, they're a commercial developer, even though what they developed is housing, so,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
you
No,
know, that if
Then they're not
taxes were
commercial.
lower, you know.
It's a commercial property though, so
Right.
anything over 3 units is a commercial property.
multifamily?
Yeah, because I mean, it's making income for someone, it's a commercial property.
Right, as
You can't
opposed
assess
to
it.
like mixed use, would be the same thing.
It seems residential.
It's not retail, I'll give you that, but it's a commercial property.
Aren't they all residential though? I think we're splitting hairs here on
Right.
different.
It's no different
officially
than a
termed.
mixed use building in my, like Mosaic, in my opinion.
Oh, but it is.
The
because
cost
there's
of
no commercial.
taxes,
Oh, I see what you're saying.
the cost of the taxes is an added cost for whoever is developing that property, whether it's redevelopment or starting from the ground up.
Yeah, the bid assessment statutes definitely wouldn't treat it as a commercial property in that sense, but in the global picture of
Right.
building code and things like that, it is a commercial property.
A macro.
Right.
So you consider that economic development?
Yeah, to Commissioner Cudmore point, like, if it is stabilizing or growing the tax base, that is a portion of.
Okay, so multifamily, that is providing to the tax base. But I think you were more so on the subsidy part.
Well, that's
Oh, okay.
another point, yeah.
So it sounds like we have one.
Well, I have 4 general
Okay.
themes, but I don't know.
Go ahead, start with, give us the first one that you have.
The first one was an outdated zoning regulations.
Oh, that's my number one for me.
Number 2 is a spread out commercial district or development pattern. Number 3 is a low daytime population, and number 4 would be taxes.
I would say spread out, not unconcentrated, but commercial, not non-contiguous and spread out.
Right down.
Non-contiguous, spread out, and the parcel sizes, the parcel configurations. Not just parcel and existing building configurations. I think that's the 3 things that were major.
You could have condition, configuration, and contiguous, the 3 Cs, you know.
Oh, yeah, so contiguous, condition, you're saying the condition of the buildings, which is probably true,
Configuration.
and configuration of the space. Those are the 3. What else did I say? Was there another adjective that I missed?
Those are, yep, I have those 3.
All right, so we have 2 so far. What are the other 2?
So outdated zoning regulations, I believe, is still an option. And then we have the contiguous condition configuration one, and then we have low daytime population and taxes.
Okay.
May I ask why